Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of The Time I Left My 9 to 5. This is actually our very first solo episode in the podcast history. If you've been following along, then you know that over the past 7 episodes, I've had the incredible privilege of sitting down with amazing people who have all taken that leap from traditional employment to pursuing their own path. And here's something that I found really fascinating. While every single person's journey was so completely unique, the questions that they grappled with when they were thinking about leaving a 9 to 5 were almost identical. Whether I was talking to a best-selling author, a tech founder, or someone who left corporate to start their own consulting business, the same concerns kept coming up. Questions like, how do I know that it's the right time? How much money should I have saved? How do I take that first step and pivot to something completely different? How do I discover the right idea? And how do I know something is not working and it's the right time to pivot? And that is why I opened up my Instagram for a Q&A. And today I'm answering these questions that you asked. When I designed this episode, I wanted to not only be based out of my personal learnings, wisdom from past guests, but also facts and statistics from research to make sure that you're getting the most value out of your time here with me today. And I've dug into academic studies from places like Dominican University and Harvard Business Review, behavioral economics research from Nobel Prize winners like Daniel Kahneman, actual data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics to back up some of my claims, and frameworks that have been proven to actually work. We're talking real research here, not just motivational fluff, so that you can walk away with actionable framework to apply to help you think through your specific situation. Before we dive in, if you're finding value in these conversations, could you do me a quick favor and hit that rating button on whatever platform you're listening on and give this podcast a rating? Or if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like. It's such a small action, but it genuinely makes a huge difference in helping me bring more unfiltered conversations your way. Without further ado, we have our very first question here from Asher. How do you report to yourself for a deadline, or do you procrastinate? I think this is such an important question and one that probably doesn't get asked enough. When you're coming from a 9 to 5, you're used to a certain mindset and having tasks handed down to you. You have a manager, a team, a deadline that someone else sets, but when you leave that structure to work for yourself, all of that disappears. And at first, that probably feels like freedom. It felt like freedom to me. I learned quickly that freedom is a double-edged sword. When no one is telling you what to do, it can feel empowering, but at the same time paralyzing. Because you suddenly have to decide, what does success look like today? What should I actually be working on? And how do I know if I'm making progress towards the right direction? To avoid floating, you have to create structure for yourself. There is a well-known concept in psychology called self-regulation theory, and it says that our belief in our ability to manage ourselves directly affects our performance and success. In other words, if you don't trust yourself to follow through, then you probably won't. One tool that has helped me early on was the if-then planning method. There's actually a study by Peter Gallwitzer that shows this will increase your goal achievement by 300%. So instead of saying, I'll work on my business tomorrow, you say, if it's 9 a.m. on a weekday, then I will spend 2 hours on client outreach. That small shift from vague to something very specific made a huge difference, at least for me. Another aspect of productivity is your environment. I remember in Nick Singh's episode early on, he mentioned how hard it was to stay productive while working from his bedroom. He eventually got a co-working membership just so he could separate rest from work. I understand not everybody has that option, especially in the early stage when you haven't been able to make a significant amount of revenue. But what he's saying is rooted in some truth. According to a study conducted by Harvard Business Review, people who work in dedicated spaces, even if it's just a corner of your room, are up to 60% more focused than people working in multi-use spaces. So what does that actually look like? It might be a folding table that you only use for work, or a chair that faces away from your bed, from your TV, so there will be no distractions. You put your phone in the other room, and everything that you need is within reach. That's it. The other thing I would say is be honest with yourself at the end of each week. I started doing weekly reviews every Friday. I would rate my week from 1 to 10. I would ask myself, what did I actually get done this week? Did I move the needle? Did I move the needle in the right direction? What one thing would I improve on next week? This kind of self-reflection helped me feel like I have a boss again, which is a little counterintuitive and funny to say because we move away from 9 to 5 to get away from our bosses. But in this case, your boss is now yourself. So if you're leaving a 9 to 5 and wondering how to stay accountable, create structure, create space, and create reflection. Because working for yourself takes more discipline than you think. Definitely took more than I thought before I left my 9 to 5, but you can access that muscle over time. The next question here comes from Jeremy. How did you know the time was right to make the leap? The most honest answer that I can give you is you never really know. This is probably not something you were expecting or want to hear, but you truly never feel 100% ready. If you've been thinking about it for a while, that in it itself is probably your very first sign. There's this framework that Jeff Bezos used when he left his Wall Street job to start Amazon, and that I personally borrowed as well. It's called the Regret Minimization Framework. He basically asked himself, when I'm 80, will I regret trying and failing or not trying at all? And you know what? Most of us would regret not trying. From my episode with Megan Liu, she mentioned for her to leave her tech job to pursue content creation full-time, she had both push and pull factors. Push from her corporate job that she was not happy in, and pull by her content creation side hustle at the time, which opened her eyes up to a lot of different possibilities. And that was true for me as well. The pull is going to be your ultimate dream, whatever is calling your name. Maybe it's financial freedom, maybe it's making an impact, maybe it's the opportunity to have a seat at a table that you could never have a chance to if you went the corporate route. And the push is your current situation. Are you dreading your Sunday nights? Are you checking out mentally at work? Do you find yourself becoming quieter and quieter during meetings because you don't see a point in speaking up? One career transition research shows that over 80% of people report greater job satisfaction after making a change. But the majority also said that they waited too long and that waiting made it harder. So if you're thinking about making a jump right now or starting to have that idea, I think the 10-10-10 rule by Susie Walsh is another framework that could really help you. In a nutshell, the 10-10-10 rule is a decision-making framework that encourages you to consider the potential impact of your choice over 3 time frames. You'll be thinking about 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. This way of long and short-term thinking let you gain a broader perspective and make more informed decisions that align with your long-term goals. So ask yourself, how will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes? What about in 10 months? And what about in 10 years? If the answer in 10 years is somewhere around regret, then that's telling you something. But let's take, for example, the decision to go to the gym. You may not feel great in the first 10 minutes. Maybe you had a long day at work, you're already comfy in your pajamas at home, you just don't want to go. But think about how will it make you feel in 10 months or 10 years. A little bit of a cliche example, but I think the answer is pretty clear. And my last point on this question is to make sure that you're making a calculated jump. Please, please, please don't just get fed up with work one day and say you quit, like the movies. It doesn't work like the movies. This is something I learned from Mike Lewis' book, When to Jump, which is the book that I would recommend, and a book that I treated like the Bible for the final month, leading me to quit my 6-figure data scientist job in tech. Mike interviewed hundreds of people who made bold career pivots, from investment bankers who became surf instructors to engineers who became cheesemakers. What stuck with me was that nearly none of them jumped blindly. All of their leaps looked courageous from the outside, but behind the scenes, it was all deeply calculated. Mike talks about this idea of building a jump curve, where you plan, prepare, and slowly build towards your leap while still working your current job. That means things like testing your ideas on nights and weekends, talking to people already doing what you want to do, and getting your finances in order so you can buy yourself a runway, and most importantly, getting clear on your why. Because when the initial excitement wears off, and it will, it's your preparation that keeps you grounded. The leap isn't just about leaving everything behind, it's about creating a bridge from where you are to where you want to be. So what do you do with all of this information? My advice is that once you've run the numbers, Once you've tested the waters, at some point, you have to trust yourself enough to jump. There will never be a single plan on Earth which eliminates all the risks. You can think about this forever, but there is always going to be a leap of faith moment. But that doesn't mean that you're leaping blind. It just means that you believe you'll figure it out once you land. Now that rhymes. Speaking of financial cushions, moving on to our next question from Balajar, which is how much money should I have before leaving my 9 to 5? Oh man, this is such a practical question. And I love, Balajar, that you're thinking about this. Because here's the thing, and this is going to sound a little scary, but according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, 82% of new businesses fail because of cash flow issues. 82%. That's not because people had bad ideas. It's because they ran out of money before they could make it work. From my personal experience and from talking to people on the podcast, I would say at the very minimum, you should have 6 months of expenses saved. But honestly, 1 to 2 years is the sweet spot. Save enough living expenses so that even if you don't make any money, $0 from your new adventure, you can maintain your current living standard for 1 to 2 years. Worst case scenario, go back to the job that you came from. This will allow you to focus on building your business without immediate financial pressure. And you need to give yourself a runway to succeed. And that's so important. What I realize is most people don't experience success on the first thing that they try. Even if you think you know exactly what you want to do before you quit, life happens and you will need to pivot and you will need that financial power to do that. Now, once you quit your job, you're likely to make adjustments to your lifestyle and spend a little bit less and be more conscious because when you stop seeing that paycheck coming in every month, it is going to become very, very real. You can determine the minimum monthly amount you need to cover by using the Ramen profitability calculation. Basically, what's your absolute minimum you need monthly to survive? Multiply this number by the number of months that you want your runway to last. For example, if your essential expense are $2,000 per month and you want an 18-month runway, you would need $36,000 saved. You can also follow the 50-20-30 budgeting guideline to start putting those savings aside. So 50% of your paycheck on needs, 30% on wants, which would fall under the category of your runway money in this case, and 20% on savings. This is for long-term investment, so think retirement. And moving on to our next question from Megan, how do you approach getting the feel of the career you want to pivot in to ensure that it's actually what you want? Smart question, because nothing is worse than making a huge life change only to realize that you don't actually like what you pivoted into. A personal anecdote to answer your question here. When I was working as a data scientist, I started to think at some point maybe tech recruiting was my true calling. Maybe I would like to become a tech recruiter. I'm not sure where those thoughts came from exactly, but basically what I did was I volunteered for a management role at the Humane Society that gave me a taste of that recruitment world. I managed a team of 20 volunteers and the work involved a lot of interviewing, onboarding, and training. Basically the same conversations over and over. And that's when I realized that wasn't it for me. I didn't want to spend my days asking the same 5 questions, but without that experience, I don't think I would have ever known. A study from PathMatch found that people who shadow professionals or test drive new roles are up to 60% more confident in their career choices. But if shadowing isn't an option, here are 4 other ways to do the try before you buy approach for your next career move. The first one is conducting informational interviews. This one is low effort and high return. A LinkedIn study found that 80% of professionals are open to informational interviews. So you'd be surprised how little rejection you would actually get. And for informational interviews, we're talking about 20 minutes chats to share advice. You're not asking for a job. You're just asking, what's your day actually like? What is so great about it? What is frustrating you? What surprised you getting into this role? And second, you can try the documentary method. Follow professionals in your target field on social media, read industry publications, attend webinars, watch how people talk about their work, what excites them, what challenges them, and maybe you start to feel whether you vibe with that world or not. The third one, and my favorite approach, is test drive approach. If you can, volunteer, freelance, or do side projects in that space. Even a few hours a month would count. According to LinkedIn's Workplace Learning Report, people who do hands-on learning like this are twice as likely to make a successful career pivots. And another stats from the U.S. National Volunteer Service Organization found that 25% of volunteers in professional roles get job offers within a year. Lastly, and very honestly, sometimes you just have to try it and be okay with pivoting again if it doesn't work out. I remember reading it from somewhere, a bit of an older statistics, is that an average person pivots 7 times in their careers. The cost of trying and pivoting is often much lower than the cost of wondering what if for the rest of your life. Next question is from Moishi. Moishi asks, how to make career pivots from nonprofit organizations. After volunteering at a nonprofit myself for over the past 4 years and taking on a lot of different roles, I truly believe that what you have been doing in the nonprofit world is actually gold in the corporate world. You've likely been managing complex projects with limited resources, collaborating across diverse stakeholders, and you're probably solving problems very creatively because you don't have big budgets. And those are the exact skills that are really, really hot in the business world. Things like leadership, communication, and adaptability are consistently being ranked as top hiring priorities, and those are the soft skills that nonprofit professionals would typically have. I think maybe the problem here is not that you don't have the skills, it's that you need to first realize them and second, reframe them in the language that your next industry will understand. So, for example, instead of saying managed volunteer programs on your resume, you can try led a cross-functional team of 20 plus volunteers, increased retention by 30% through an improved onboarding process, and manage timelines with zero budget overrun. That's a mouthful, and I definitely used AI for that. But all that to say is that use AI to your advantage, and those keywords will get picked up by the algorithm. Another example is if you want to say organized fundraising events, maybe try planned and executed large-scale events that generated $50,000 in revenue while optimizing ROI and stakeholder engagement. Your advantage here is that you are not starting your transition, for example, to tech from scratch, problem many university students face. You already have the experience, which is really, really powerful thing. Finally, our last question, Fideli asks, how does one muster the courage to leave a teaching job that's permanent, but it's of lower pay? Fideli, first, I want to acknowledge that leaving a permanent position, especially in teaching, takes a lot of courage. And you're not just leaving a job, you're leaving security, possibly your pension, and maybe even a sense of purpose and your identity. What I've learned is that having a plan is absolute key. You won't see a way out of your current situation if you can't mentally picture where you want to be. Or in current social media terms, being a little delulu is not necessarily a bad thing anymore. Studies from Dominican University of California show that people who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them. So whatever your vision is, whether it's financial freedom so you can spend more time with your family or making $1 million in your business, be unapologetic about it, write it down, remember it, put it on your mirror, remind yourself every single day. There is something called loss aversion in behavior psychology, and this is a cognitive bias studied by Nobel Prize-winning researchers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. It shows that we feel losses about 2.5 times more intensely than equivalent gains. So right now, it makes sense that your brain is focused on what you might lose. Security, benefits, consistency, routine. But try flipping that frame of thinking. What will you actually gain from this? Is it freedom? Is it higher income potential, no ceilings, more time, better work-life management? The courage is going to come from having a clear vision, a solid plan, and trusting that you won't let yourself fail. You've already shown you can succeed in a challenging field like teaching. Those skills like patience, communications, managing different personalities, working with limited resources, they can translate to so many other fields. And it's really important to remember that quitting your teaching job doesn't just mean you're leaving your identity behind. You're also moving forward to something better and picking something else up along the way. That is a wrap on our very first solo Q&A episode. I hope these research-backed answers gave you some clarity, encouragement, or even a next step. And remember that you're not alone in this journey, and you're definitely not alone in the way that you're feeling. If you like this episode and want to submit your own question for a future one, you can follow me on Instagram at MaggieInData or follow the podcast Instagram at thetime I left on my 9to5.podcast. This is where I will be sharing the Q&A box. I will link them both both in the description. I love hearing from you and learning what you're navigating. So don't hesitate to reach out and come and say hi. Until next time, keep questioning, keep planning, and keep believing in yourself. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, you've got this.